As you know, for over a decade, we have all been spoon-fed the exact same story. Gypsy Rose, the poor, sick little girl who was trapped by her evil mother. The survivor that was finally able to break free. But what if this isn't the truth? What if the version that made Gypsy so famous was just another layer of manipulation, one that never died with Dee Dee, but evolved after her murder? Because once you really dive into the Gypsy Rose case, and I mean when you look beneath that exterior, when you truly do some digging, you start to realise that Dee Dee Blanchard, she wasn't the cartoon villain that she was portrayed to be, that Gypsy painted her to be. And Gypsy herself, she is not the helpless little girl that she pretends to be either. This isn't a fairy tale about a mother's cruelty and her daughter's escape. This is a web of lies that's been spun for years. And tonight we are going to be stripping all of that back. The sympathy, the PR, the soft focus survivor narrative. And we're going to look at what is really left when you stop taking Gypsy Rose Blanchard at her word. Because once you do, you might realise yourself that the true villain in this case isn't the one that we've been booing for all these years. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new here. My name is Anna, I am a certified yapper and I jump on here twice a week, every single week on a Wednesday and Sunday, apart from today which should be a Friday if I can edit this in time, because I filmed this video 3 times now. But every Wednesday and Sunday I jump on here and we talk about a true crime case that is, you know, keeping us all up at night. So if true crime is your jam, I would highly suggest that you subscribe, get the notification bell on, because I'm here for you twice a week, every single week, and it's free. So if you see my last Gypsy Rose video, you will know that I had to take it down because I had sound quality issues. No ideal. But it was also a blessing in disguise. Because when I reviewed the footage, when I was trying to fix the audio, I just thought I wasn't really being true to myself. I was kind of holding back on a lot of what I believe, which is very unlike me, but it can be daunting to come on the internet and talk about someone who now finds herself in such a high profile position, in a position where she has a cult-like following. To go up against that can be really scary. But that is what we need to do in order to get to the truth. So tonight I'm going to dive into everything that I believe, everything that is backed with evidence-based facts. So if you did see my last video, don't worry, I'm not rehashing the same spiel. This is going to be completely new and I'm going to be diving into a lot of the angles that I had learned from Becca Scoops, but was a bit, you know, cautious to bring up in the last video. Now with that being said, of course my video is only going to be like, I don't know, like an hour long, something like that. Becca Scoops has done hundreds of hours worth of work on this case. I'm picking out the main bits that really hit me, but if you want even more detail, go to Becca Scoops. Give that woman her flowers, because my God, the digging that she has done, the work, the time that she has committed to bringing the truth to light is absolutely incredible. Just a quick reminder before we dive in, if you could please engage with this video in some way, leaving a like, leaving a comment, subscribing if you haven't already. And one of the most important things, please hype this video if you can. I know a lot of you hyped the last one, so you might not be able to now, but if you have any hype points available, please, I need them. But without any further rambling and any further ado, let's dive into the case of Gypsy Rose, but let's expose the truth. So the last time I did this video, I sort of told the first part from Gypsy's angle, which I think confused some people. I was trying to expose it from her side, but I don't think it kind of landed. So I'm going to give you the quickest, vaguest synopsis of this case, just in case you're not aware. It'll only be a minute. So here's the version that we have all heard, the version that we were all spoon-fed for years. And that is that Gypsy Rose Blanchard, she was a little girl who was trapped by her controlling mother. Her mother was Claudine Dee Dee Blanchard, and this was apparently a mother who faked her daughter's illnesses, kept her in a wheelchair, fooled doctors, fooled neighbours, fooled charities, all into believing that her daughter was terminally ill. Then, as we know, in June of 2015, that pink fairy tale dream all came to an end. Dee Dee's Facebook would suddenly post That bitch is dead. Neighbours alerted the police, and when the police checked, they would find Dee Dee Blanchard laying in her bed, stabbed to death 17 times, covered with a blanket. And then what worried people most was that her young disabled daughter Gypsy, she was gone. Her wheelchair that she was confined to, the wheelchair that she apparently needed as her transport, that was still there. They thought that Gypsy had been raped and kidnapped. Now, the reason they thought she had been raped was because a secondary comment on Dee Dee's Facebook post confirmed this. So the police, they go ahead and they track the IP address of the person who made these posts to Dee Dee's Facebook. This takes them to Wisconsin, and more importantly, it would take them to the house of Nick Godejohn. Now, Nick Godejohn, this was Gypsy's secret boyfriend that she had met online. He was the one who had stabbed Dee Dee to death. But what shocked police the most is they were expecting to find this disabled, bald-headed, sick girl. But when they find Gypsy, her hair's growing. She's healthy, she's walking, she's talking with so much ease. Very soon, Gypsy claimed that she was desperate to escape her mother, that her mother was medically abusive, and this is why she did what she did. Apparently, it was the last resort. Apparently, it was the desperate resort. Gypsy was then given a plea deal. She pled guilty to second-degree murder. She got 10 years in prison, but would be released after 8. Now, Nick Godejohn, the one who did the murder, he was served a life sentence, convicted of first-degree murder without the possibility of parole. Nick Godejohn will rot in prison, and Gypsy Rose, she walks free. And when she was paroled from prison in 2023, she wasn't treated like a murderer. She was treated like a celebrity survivor. And that's the story that a lot of us bought for the longest time, that Gypsy was a victim turned survivor. She was the innocent girl of the evil mother and had to do what she had to do to escape. But the truth behind that night, the truth behind Gypsy herself, it is very far from that fairy tale that we were all sold. So I want to start off by debunking some of the myths surrounding Gypsy Blanchard. Let's expose some of her lies. And believe me, these are only going to be some of them. If you want all the details, if you want the hot scoop, you need to go to Becca Scoops. She'll tell you all. But just so you know, it is one hell of a rabbit hole. So the first lie, and the lie that I feel might be the biggest of all, is the medical abuse claim. Gypsy has stated on countless occasions, whilst in prison, post-prison, in interviews, and especially in that infamous interview with Dr. Phil, that she was severely medically abused, that she had to undergo many painful procedures that were completely unnecessary. She claimed to have anywhere between 30 to 33 procedures, maybe even more.
How many surgeries did you have?
So many.
10, 20?
I'm pretty sure 30 more.
And all of this was apparently at the demand of her mother, for her mother to keep the attention and keep the sympathy that they were getting. And before people who support Gypsy come for me, let me just clarify one thing, okay? I am not saying that Dee Dee didn't lie. I am not saying that Dee Dee didn't fabricate some things. The main one being leukemia. Gypsy never had leukemia, and we know that this is true, so we can't deny it. So Gypsy, she is feeding the world the narrative that she underwent 30 to 33 painful surgeries, possibly even more. Apparently all these surgeries were completely unnecessary. But when you actually look at records, not Gypsy's word, not someone else's word, the actual medical records, this will show you that Gypsy only underwent between 2 and 4 invasive procedures. Now, excuse me whilst I refer to my notes because I don't want to get anything wrong. So in 2001, she had a laparoscopic gastric reflux procedure. Again in 2001, she had a G-tube placement and also a muscle biopsy performed on her right thigh. Now, this was actually a diagnostic test to rule out muscular dystrophy. And then in 2004, this is when she had her salivary glands removed. And the thing is, Gypsy has tried to claim that she's had all of these procedures, it's been awful, it's been terrible, but Gypsy herself has actually backed up this statement, because Gypsy had drawn her scar diagram from all her surgeries, and she had drawn this for Ryan in order to be intimate with him. And on this scar diagram is exactly what we have just described there. It's not all these crazy procedures, all these tests, and she was sliced and diced. Not the case whatsoever. The scars match the treatments on record. Now, I should also state that Gypsy did also have a surgery on her eye. This was to treat her amblyopia. This is basically a lazy eye, and this surgery, absolutely necessary. No ifs, no buts, no maybes. She needed that surgery. There was also confirmation on her paediatric records that as a child she did have some asthma issues, alongside frequent ear infections, which led to her having to have tubes placed inside her ears to help with drainage. Gypsy will tell you that her mother faked her asthma, but there's actually records of doctors stating that Gypsy was showing these signs. So at this point, taking out the surgeries we knew were absolutely necessary, like the tubes and also the eye surgery, etc., we have around 3 invasive procedures and then 1 diagnostic test. Not 30 to 33 as Gypsy has claimed. And let me clarify here, any unnecessary procedures performed on a child, that is abuse. But were these procedures necessary? Were they required as part of Gypsy's medical care? Let's discuss. So I am sure we have all heard about Gypsy's microdeletion, the IQ2 1.1. This is basically a tiny piece of chromosome 1 that is missing. Now, something about this chromosomal disorder that we all need to be aware of is that there is many symptoms that can present alongside this. Now, some people have none, some people have mild, and some people have severe symptoms. Every single patient presents differently. So then Gypsy, she comes out of prison 2023, and she stated that very recently she found out that she had a microdeletion. But luckily for her, she was within the 75% who showed no symptoms, which is a very, very, very convenient story to tell when you're trying to claim that your mother medically abused you. Because if she really was within the 75% that doesn't present any symptoms, this would mean that Gypsy then had been medically abused. But evidence would show that when Gypsy was younger, and this was before Dee Dee's murder, and I do apologise, I didn't note down the exact date, but you can look this up for yourself, she was talking to a friend online, and she told this friend that she had found out that she had a microdeletion, a chromosomal disorder, and that this was causing all her symptoms and all her illnesses. She then told her friend not to worry because she's a fighter. So what this tells us is that Gypsy was well aware of her microdeletion long before the murders even occurred. And what is very, very, very interesting to me and to other people within this case is the fact that if Gypsy was presenting symptoms, if her microdeletion really did give her various symptoms, then every procedure that we've discussed that she underwent would have been absolutely necessary to treat her symptoms. What? And I know that people are going to jump in and they're going to say, but Anna, maybe she really was within the 75% who don't experience any symptoms, that never ever knows that they have a microdeletion. But to that, I raise you this. Signs of microdeletion, they don't just show up in physical feeling, they also show up in physical appearance. And I want to clarify yet again, I feel like I'm doing so many disclaimers, but with what I'm about to say, I mean absolutely no disrespect. I am in no way trying to be nasty or anything like that. I'm just trying to state the facts. So someone with an IQ2 1.1 microdeletion, they have certain physical features that shows they might have a microdeletion. Now, one of the main features that you might find on someone with an IQ2 1.1 microdeletion is a very large and/or bulbous nasal tip. And I'm sorry, but when you compare Gypsy Rose's photos to the photos of children with the same microdeletion, it's very uncanny. They can also have eye abnormalities, a lazy eye, cross-eyed. Gypsy herself, she has admitted that she was cross-eyed. She had surgery on her eye. Both of these physical features are things that Gypsy possesses. I mean, I can't remember if Gypsy had a nose job. I feel like she did. But I will obviously insert pictures prior to that. But when you compare her photos with these other children with the microdeletion, you can't deny the similarities. Am I saying that Gypsy Rose faced no abuse whatsoever? No. Because keeping your child confined to a wheelchair for your own financial gain, shaving her head for your own financial gain, that's wrong. That is abuse. But was Dee Dee medically abusive? Was she really this medically abusive monster that was intentionally hurting her daughter? I don't believe it. And in short, if these medical procedures that Gypsy underwent were necessary for her microdeletion, then Dee Dee is nowhere near this horrific abuser that she's been painted to be. And it is so unfair for that to be the legacy of a woman who lost her life to a brutal, evil murder. So just to confirm, just to reiterate, according to the records, procedures that Gypsy had underwent that were signed off by Dee Dee, these weren't random stunts. They aligned with the symptoms of microdeletion. She wasn't slicing open her daughter for attention, but she was milking real issues for resources. And honestly, what will always tickle my pickle is the fact that Gypsy Rose, she claims that she was never sick. She says she was perfectly healthy, she had no issues whatsoever. And yet, in one of her police interviews, you know, when she's finished flirting with one of the officers whilst Nick is crying down the hall worried about Gypsy, you know? But when one of the officers tells her that she is going to be held for murder, she puts up her sweet innocent little voice, she raises her voice, she's kind of shouting and she's like, no sir, sir, I'm not a liar, sir. Please sir, I can't go to prison, I have many medical conditions.
So you're going to keep telling me lies?
I'm not, sir. I'm not, sir.
All right. Now you're going to be booked in for, later on down the line, you're going to be booked in for probably murder, okay? As long as, and with him as well, okay?
I didn't murder my mom, sir.
Listen to me. Listen to me. You did, because you're behind it. You pulled all the strings on it, and you're behind it. Listen, Gypsy, I'm not going to sit and argue with you about it, okay?
Only when it was come and get me.
No, that's not all you wanted. There's a lot more to this whole story that you're leaving out. I'm not going to play the sympathetic game. I'm not like that, okay? I can see right through it, okay?
Please, I'm not able to be in jail. I have a lot of medical needs.
I understand that, and they'll get taken care of, okay? So, sit tight.
Aha! So, what you're telling us now, Gypsy, is that you are happy to play along with the ruse of these medical conditions if you believe it will work in your favour. And there is more to this point. So listen, Gypsy, she might not have been complicit in these scams right away, okay? Because the scams did start off when she was a child. She can't really be complicit at that point. But medical records and doctors' notes, these confirm that Gypsy was malingering by the age of 14. Possibly before, but definitely at the age of 14. In 2005, at 14 years old, a physical exam would be conducted on Gypsy Rose, and at this point, it is very clear that Gypsy was a willing player within the game. She is in that room with a doctor, and she told the doctor that she can't transfer herself from her wheelchair onto, I don't know, her bed or a seat or something like that. The actual note stated, patient reports she cannot transfer self from wheelchair. And then other medical records and other doctor notes, this would state that although Gypsy was claiming to be paralysed, saying that she couldn't move her legs, sometimes she would end up moving her legs in the way that a paralysed person cannot. Records also state that on numerous occasions, Gypsy herself, with a doctor, would exaggerate her medical conditions. Always trying to appear a lot worse than she was, these tests would be conducted and it was noted that it wasn't as bad as what Gypsy was saying. And yes, we know Gypsy was brought up to go along with certain things, to go along with leukemia and things like that. But if she was truly desperate to escape, which she says she was, this would have been her golden opportunity. And you know, I think one of the funniest things that I've seen is possibly the snow video. I'm sure we all know what I'm referring to, but the snow video, this was when Gypsy was being videoed by Dee Dee. She was playing in the snow and she was pretending that she couldn't move around by herself. So she would pick her legs up and move them in a way that a paralysed person might have to do. But then you can kind of see her kick her legs, and then at point she's moving her legs with only her legs. She's not using her hands for assistance. She keeps forgetting that she's meant to be paralysed.
Missouri, I am about to dive off our porch into the pile of snow. You ready?
Now, another claim that was made by Gypsy in interviews, in prison, post-release, all of this crap, was that she knew she could walk and she knew that she could talk, which again backs up the case of her being a victim at one point, but also being a willing accomplice. But she stated that she truly believed that she had leukemia because her mother was feeding her so many medications every single day. However, previous blood tests that had been conducted long before the murder and in the time where Gypsy supposedly had leukemia, these didn't detect any medications. Not even medications that she had been prescribed. And I'm jumping ahead here slightly, but it is worth mentioning that when the police had went through their home after Dee Dee had been found murdered, when they raided the medicine cabinet, it was more over-the-counter products that they would find. Things like Tylenol, pain relief, anything that we could buy from the shops. And there was a few prescribed things that Gypsy had actually been noted to need. Gypsy has forever painted the narrative that she was terrified of her mother. But even Gypsy's own memoir describes something very different. At one point she notes that she thought her mother was scared of her. Enter the BB gun incident. So around 2011, Gypsy Rose, she had purchased a BB gun online. Now, a BB gun, as we know, it has like little pellets as bullets, like you can shoot them at people, gun wars, But Gypsy had purchased one of these online. Now, it was around this time that she was also speaking to multiple men online with these fake identities, fake personas, the aliases, the lot. One day, Dee Dee discovers that Gypsy Rose has purchased this BB gun. And she's furious. So an argument would break out between the two, and Gypsy Rose, she turns around and she shoots her mother with the BB gun. Now, obviously, this isn't going to kill her because it's a freaking BB gun. But it does leave a bruise, it'll leave a mark. These things are quite painful. And whilst it didn't have a huge injury, it had a huge impact because she made a point to her mother that she wasn't this terrified, innocent little girl. It was like two people battling in this toxic power struggle. It shows that Gypsy could be violent, Gypsy could be aggressive, and Gypsy could shout and scream at her mother, which was heard many times by neighbours. People were actually uncomfortable sometimes when they heard how Gypsy spoke to her mother. Does that sound like someone who's scared of repercussions? Does that sound like someone who is terrified? I don't think so. But most importantly, this whole angle, this shows that Gypsy didn't just snap when it came to the murder. She has always had this little violent streak. And I mean, we know she didn't just snap when it came to the murder because it was premeditated for frickin' months in advance. But this just shows that Gypsy wasn't as scared of her mother's consequences as she made out to be. But back to my point, just in case you were like, Anna, where is the point? Here it comes. In Gypsy's own memoir that she has written, she would reference the BB gun incident. She says that she thought her mother was scared of her and that her mother also had realised baby could be violent. Honey and baby were equals. Okay. Interesting, Gypsy. Interesting. And of course then we have the claims that Gypsy didn't know they were scamming money, didn't realise that they were getting all these free trips through scams regarding their health. But this isn't true. And it's very clear that she did know this because a year into talking to Nick, a year into that relationship, she told him that they were running scams, that they were scamming money, that she was in this wheelchair, that she was pretending to have leukemia to get money, and that she could actually walk and she could talk absolutely fine. This again proves that she was complicit. She knew what they were up to. She knew that they were getting financial rewards from her being ill. Now, I think we all know the level of manipulation and exploitation that Nick Godejohn had faced at the hands of Gypsy Rose. I mean, we all know that she had every intention of using Nick as a pawn in her vicious, evil game, and that she would tell any lie she had to ensure he went down for it. So Gypsy tells police, tells interviewers that Nick was the one with all these alter egos. He was the one with all these different personas, and that she was forced to participate in this role play. She didn't want to, but she felt like she had to because Nick was very harsh. And yet, what's hilarious again is that Gypsy Rose, when she was asked to name any of Nick's personas, she couldn't even do this. She couldn't name one. However, she could name every single one of her own. And if you think you can poke holes in that, we are going to backpedal to 2011. Before Gypsy met Nick, before Gypsy knew of Nick, there was a man by the name of Dan Glidewell. Now, Dan, he was in his 30s and he would meet Gypsy at a sci-fi convention. But from that very day onward, Gypsy Rose was obsessed with Dan, even calling Dan her boyfriend, even though he wasn't. So they chatted online constantly after this. At first, it was just friends. It was her confiding, them getting to know each other. And she told Dan Glidewell that her mother kept her in a wheelchair, which he found to be odd, obviously. And then as the conversation continues over time, this very quickly develops into a sexual relationship. The chat turns sexual, and Dan would say in his sworn testimony under oath at Nick's trial that Gypsy had introduced him into the world of power exchange roleplay. That's right, she introduced him. And this was long before she met Nick, and she tried to say that Nick had introduced her to power exchange roleplay. But that is not true. And another thing that shows how complicit Gypsy was within this scam is she quite clearly knew she wasn't a child, that she was an adult with sexual desires and sexual fantasies. And listen, I know teens, they have their own sexual desires and fantasies. I get it. Puberty, hormones, all that jazz, I know. But Gypsy very much knew that she was an adult. This is a man in his 30s. Gypsy would leave home on multiple occasions going to visit Dan without her wheelchair. This shows that Gypsy was able to leave home and that if she had really wanted, she could have got help, but she didn't because she was complicit in the scheme. So then we come to the situation, the straw that broke the camel's back, shall we say. I'm going to tell you first of all what Gypsy said this scenario was, and then I'll tell you what I and many others believes that it was. Gypsy had stated that 2 days before the murder, her and Dee Dee had gotten into a furious argument. Now apparently this was because Gypsy had went to Dee Dee and told her, I don't want this feeding tube anymore. I don't need it, I don't want it. Now apparently there was an upcoming surgery that Gypsy was having to go to hospital for, and she told her mother that she also didn't want this. Gypsy said that Dee Dee had refused to allow her to remove her feeding tube, and that Gypsy will keep the feeding tube and undergo the surgery. And according to Gypsy, at one point, this is when she decided she wanted to kill her mother. Which we know is not true because we've all seen the messages since then and her story changes. Now Gypsy said, I didn't want this surgery because I've had it so many times before. I've undergone all these procedures. I don't want any more. The surgery that she was going to have wasn't a surgery at all. It was actually just to have her feeding tube changed over. Something that can quite easily be done at home, at the doctor, in the hospital. But also, if she didn't want this feeding tube, she could have went to that appointment and she could have spoke up and told the doctors, hey, listen, I'm not ill. I'm absolutely fine. Take this feeding tube out. My mum's abusing me. But again, she didn't. Now, Gypsy would talk about how her mother didn't have her do a swallow test or anything like this and that she just automatically had her fitted with a feeding tube. But medical records would state different. Gypsy was in hospital, I want to say, for around a month when they decided that this feeding tube was actually necessary. And then we come to what many of us believe is the actual catalyst for Gypsy wanting and planning to murder her mother. And we believe that this is the day that Dee Dee Blanchard found out about Dan Glidewell. Dee Dee felt as though this relationship was wrong. After all, Dan was a man within his 30s. Gypsy was a lot younger, whether they're going by her childlike age or, the age that she actually was. Dee Dee forced her to put an end to this relationship. And of course, Gypsy, she was absolutely furious. She was obsessed with Dan. She wanted to be with Dan. And her obsession, it didn't fade over time. It very much remained there. In fact, it probably only intensified. And her obsession was so strong with Dan that even Nick knew she was obsessed. And he knew that she was obsessed right up until the murder, even post-murder. Because in one of the interview rooms, Nick actually says that he will apologise to everyone for the murder, but he will not apologise to Dan. And he believed that Gypsy and Dan were going to run off and be together and that Nick was going to be the fall guy. I think to this very day, one thing that just really steams my clams when it comes to Gypsy Rose is the fact that She never wants to be called the M word, as she would say. She doesn't want to be called a murderer because she says, I wasn't the one who did the actual killing. You know, I only orchestrated the whole damn thing. But she wants people to remember that the one who actually stabbed her mother to death was Nick. But then she leaves out the crucial details, the fact that she groomed, exploited and manipulated this young vulnerable man into doing her dirty work. And this also is something that just majorly me off, okay, is when people talk about Gypsy Rose and they talk about the Menendez brothers, they'll say, oh well, Gypsy Rose didn't actually kill her mother, the Menendez brothers shot their parents. Yes, but the Menendez brothers also didn't go out and get a third person involved in their tragedy. They didn't go out and manipulate someone else to do their dirty work. They done it themselves, and it doesn't make it right. But they were at the hands of horrific abuse, being abused by Jose. Kitty knew about it, wasn't doing nothing about it. Many other victims have come forward to say that they were also abused by Jose. And if Gypsy was being so horribly abused, if she was being so horribly manipulated, if she was terrified for her life, then why didn't she just kill Dee Dee? And then present her story, present her case, because she knew if she murdered Dee Dee that there was likely no way she would be able to get a reduced sentence, that she would be able to get the plea. So she brought in a third person to do her dirty work, knowing that she could play the helpless victim. And I just need to express my opinion here. When it comes to Gypsy Rose being online, we know she was talking to multiple people, multiple different aliases were being used, and I truly believe she was surfing the web for that person to commit her dirty work. I believe that she was looking for someone vulnerable, someone impressionable, and the day she met Nick Godejohn, she struck gold. And I do not believe for a second that Gypsy Rose cared for Nick. I don't believe she loved Nick. I believe, to Gypsy Rose, Nick was just the pawn in her game that she needed to win. Now, when Nick Godejohn, when he was examined, it was very evident right away that he had cognitive impairment. An impairment that meant that he wasn't able to reason or problem solve by himself. He needed someone to support him, to do this for him. Enter Gypsy Rose, who will happily exploit the living shit out of that. Nick Godejohn was deemed to have the mind of a 10 to 11-year-old. He had diminished capacity. It was stated that any decision making that Nick would make by himself would be of that of a child. He had the maturity of a child. He was suggestible. He was vulnerable. He was very immature, and he was someone deemed to be susceptible to direction. Nick also has level 2 autism, and experts have said that he might not understand the consequences to his actions. If he's being told that something is the right thing to do, he's not going to question it because he needs that help, he needs that direction. So when Gypsy met Nick in 2012 on that Christian dating website, she thought she had won the frickin' lottery. She won the jackpot gold. And not because Nick was her Prince Charming, but because he was her ticket to freedom. He was her ticket to being with Dan. Gypsy played Nick. Gypsy realised how quickly Nick was falling for her. What started off as awkward flirting, it evolved into this fantasy world where Gypsy Rose was Kitten, and Kitten was meant to be this submissive damsel. And then Nick had his dark side, an alter ego named Victor. And Nick wasn't too fond of this violent dark side. He didn't like it, it wasn't who he was, but Gypsy told him that she loved the dark side of Nick just as much as she loved his sweet side. If not, a wee bit more. And honestly, I know it sounds like really bad fan fiction, but the thing is here, it ends with an actual dead body. Nick Godejohn was so head over heels in love with Gypsy Rose Blanchard that he was devastated for her when she told him that her mother confines her to a wheelchair, that her mother medically abuses her, makes her go through painful surgeries that she doesn't need. Nick was confused why someone would do that to Gypsy. Why would someone treat the person he loves like that? Gypsy told him that she felt safe having Victor, having Nick, having that dark side, having a protector. She called him her hero, the one that could save her from her evil mother. Every single time Nick hesitated, every single time he spoke back regarding her sick, twisted plans, Gypsy reinforced the fact that Dee Dee was destroying her life, and the only thing that was keeping her and Nick apart was her own mother. And then she eventually stopped hinting about all of this, and she eventually just crossed the line that changed everything. The day when she said, "Would you kill my mom for me?" And again, Nick couldn't understand why someone would want to kill their mother. I mean, he knows that she's suffering, but why would any person want their mum dead? He could never imagine hurting his own mum. He would never do that. He said that even though his mother and him had some bad times, she was a good mother. She could never imagine hurting her. Nick had even confided in someone at some point, and apologies, I can't remember if it was a sister or a friend, but he confided saying that he thinks that Gypsy might be crazy. But of course, Gypsy, she was able to manipulate this, play with his mind, make him believe everything she said. So 2 years into the relationship, Gypsy, she tells Nick that Dee Dee had uterine cancer and that she's only going to live for another couple of months. She said that her mother was terminal, that she was dying. She kept telling Nick how her mother was in so much pain and how she just wanted to end it all, to end her mother's suffering. And also, by ending her mother's suffering, she would finally be free. Gypsy told Nick that this was the morally right thing to do, that he would be doing such an amazing thing by helping relieve Dee Dee's pain and also freeing her at the same time. Nick really could be this knight in shining armour that saves the princess from the tower with the evil mother. And just to clear up the whole uterine cancer thing, because people do say, well, she did have uterine cancer. Yes, she did back in 1997. It was dealt with. Like, that, gone, in the past. Dee Dee was not in her best health, okay? She was diabetic, she was very overweight. You could see in her face that she wasn't exactly a well woman, but she was going nowhere in a couple of months. God, she still had years and years and years of life. I mean, she could have had even more time if she started taking care of herself. So was she in the best health at the time of the murder? No. Was she terminally ill and dying? Also no. So Gypsy knows that Nick's in love with her, Nick would do anything for her, but it's quite clear that Nick's needing that extra push, just to solidify things. So Gypsy tells Nick that she's performed a binding spell on them, and that now they were technically married. They were a married couple, which put more pressure on Nick to do as Gypsy said and try and protect Gypsy. And as we know, Gypsy orchestrated everything. She told him when to come, how to get in, what door to use, how her mother sleeps, whether this is on her back or on her front, whether her mother's a light sleeper or a deep sleeper, where her mother's room was, and what time Dee Dee would be asleep by. She bought the knife using her mother's credit card. I know some sources do state that she had stole knives and actually had 2 knives. The only sort of corroborated thing I could find was that she bought the knife off her mother's credit card and had it mailed to Nick's house. He then brought it with him to Gypsy's house. She removed it from his bag and handed it to him. She even reminded Nick to be quiet. She had texted him saying, "You have to be as silent as a ninja. Mommy's a light sleeper." Doesn't sound like someone who's terrified. Doesn't sound like someone who was caught off guard. That is not someone being manipulated. That is someone giving out instructions. Gypsy tried to say that Nick Godejohn manipulated her, that he was the one who wanted to do the killing, and that she was manipulated to go along with it. That is not true. Categorically not true. Now, when the night of the murders came, Gypsy was the one who let him into the house. She walked him to Dee Dee's room to show Nick exactly where Dee Dee was asleep. And then she herself jollied off to the bathroom, hid in there whilst he murdered her mother. And after it was done, there was no tears, there was no screaming, there was no signs of regret, no calling for help. Gypsy would step over her mother's body. She helped clean up the murder scene. Then she stole her mother's money and took off with Nick, fleeing to Wisconsin, ready to start this new desirable little life. Only she didn't want a life with Nick. They headed to Wisconsin, they ate at restaurants, they took selfies, they had sex, and Gypsy mailed the knife back to Nick's house. Because you don't want to be caught with a knife on you, hun. That's got to go somewhere. She made Nick believe that mailing the knife back to his house was the best thing. I've said it before and I will say it again. I believe this whole thing with the knife was because she absolutely planned on pinning this whole thing on Nick. Because if you really loved and cared about Nick, you would not want any risk of him getting caught. And if you thought that yous could be caught with that knife, bearing in mind you're basically America's sweetheart at this point and people are going to be looking for you, so there's a big chance that you're going to be found, why would you mail the knife back to your boyfriend's house? Sorry, your husband's house, who you apparently love? And if you really were trying to protect both of you, why didn't you just throw the knife away? Why didn't you throw it in water? Why didn't you throw it in bushes or throw it in the frickin' woods? Or why did you not mail it back to your house? I will tell you why. Because she's clever, because she's calculated, and because Nick Godejohn was nothing but a pawn in her alibi. Everything that she did post-murder, even pre-murder when she hid in the bathroom whilst it was taking place, she did this so there was no evidence of her. And then we come to the infamous Facebook post. That bitch is dead. This is Gypsy announcing to the world that she's finally free. She wants the attention. She wanted her mother's body to be found because this would play into Gypsy getting the sympathy, getting the attention, getting everything that she so desperately wanted. And then we have the sick, twisted, vile comment that Gypsy concocted about her mother being killed and how her daughter was raped. Gypsy was claiming that someone came into the house, murdered Dee Dee, then raped her. And what's even more chilling is days later when the police find Gypsy, she wasn't terrified, she wasn't traumatised. She was cool, calm and collected, smiling away, laughing away, walking on both her feet with no wheelchair in sight. Now, also what I want to point out, and this is purely speculation on my part, this is all just alleged because it's just what I purely think. I truly believe she had sex with Nick after the murder to back up this rape narrative. Because I feel like if things really went her way, she could have played it off that Nick Godejohn came into that house unprovoked, murdered her mother, raped her, and then kidnapped her. Because if she was able to go along with this lie, if they performed any tests down there, Nick's semen or DNA at least would be there. And she could go along with this narrative, only this wouldn't work because the police find their messages. And it's very clear that that is not what happened. And I also want to point out that apparently Gypsy's very first sexual experiences were with Nick Godejohn. Again, not true, because Dan Glidewell, said that they were exchanging sexy pics, sexy videos, they were masturbating on video for each other. Apparently she had an electric toothbrush that she was really friendly with. She wasn't this innocent young girl before Nick met her. She was world wise. She knew what she was up to, she knew what she wanted, and she knew how to manipulate people to get it. And yes, manipulation, obviously this has been learned from her mother. Okay, I'm not saying Dee Dee is this horrific abuser, but she was definitely a con artist. But nowhere near the level that Gypsy made out. Dee Dee was not the monster she was painted to be. Going by the procedures that she had done on Gypsy, the diagnostic test, she actually did have a sick daughter. Now, these messages between Nick and Gypsy, I mean, they're the nail in the frickin' coffin, aren't they? This shows that she didn't just stumble into murder, she didn't just snap one day, she wasn't acting in an act of desperation like she says. She choreographed it. She didn't free herself from abuse. She engineered a spectacle. And all the while, Nick Godejohn is the one rotting away in prison for the rest of his life. Gypsy's the one who has walked away with her freedom, with her fan base, and that fairy tale ending that she so desired. And again, this is not survival, this is complete strategy. Even detectives have stated that, yes, Nick is guilty of murder, there's no denying that, he was the one who did the stabbing. But detectives say that Nick was never ever given a fair trial. He didn't stand a chance, especially being cognitively impaired. He didn't have the tools at his disposal. And what is absolutely insane, and it just baffles me that Nick's trial still even went ahead after this, but the HBO special, that Mommy Dead and Dearest, that was created using the discovery before the trial even began. And in case you aren't aware, in a criminal trial, the discovery, this is a legal process where the defence and the prosecution, they exchange things like evidence and information that will be used or could be used throughout the trial. This is meant to ensure fairness and transparency on both sides. So neither side is ambushed in a trial. But somehow, Mommy Dead and Dearest, the creators, they get their hands on the discovery before the trial even takes place. Mommy Dead and Dearest was released before Nick even had his trial. And listen, I know people say, well, jurors, like, they don't watch anything to do with the trial. Wake up and smell the Play-Doh. Of course they do. Are you telling me that if you knew you were going to be a juror on this case and Mommy Dead and Dearest came out that you wouldn't watch it? Come on. I mean, listen, if you are morally sound, then maybe you wouldn't. Fair enough. But there's going to be that curiosity. And Mommy Dead and Dearest was created in a pro-Gypsy manner. This meant that in Mommy Dead and Dearest, Nick was the villain. If you've seen that, you can't really see by it during the trial. And you'll be wondering, well, who leaked the discovery? Surely this is illegal, you know? It's definitely frowned upon for sure. It wasn't leaked by the state and it wasn't leaked by law enforcement. It was actually leaked by a public defender's office. Now, it was confirmed it wasn't leaked by Nick's public defender's office, but another public defender's office. And Nick's attorney and other detectives heard through the grapevine that the person who leaked this was one of Gypsy's people. And the reason they did this was to get ahead of the game, to paint her victim narrative and to paint Nick's monster narrative. Another thing during Nick's trial which was completely unfair was the prosecution. They tried to dub him as this monster in life in general, even before the murder had taken place. They claimed that he was aggressive, he was violent, he was quick to anger, and he could have these violent outbursts. Nick's own mother had stated that her son, he had never been violent. He wasn't an aggressive type. He didn't have these violent outbursts. If Nick was ever overstimulated, if he was ever frustrated or overwhelmed, he wouldn't go to anger. He would start crying. He couldn't deal with that level of emotion. It would make him emotional in an upset way, not an angry way. And it breaks my heart to know that someone's being painted to be this monster when really they get upset when they get frustrated. And then we come to Dee Dee Blanchard, the woman who is no longer here to defend herself, to defend her name. The one who we have believed for the longest time was this medically abusive monster. And like I said earlier, there is no denying that Dee Dee wasn't perfect. She really wasn't. And Gypsy did face some form of abuse or manipulation at her hands, but it was nothing like Gypsy made out. She wasn't a medically abusive mother. She actually got her daughter the procedures that were needed for the symptoms of the microdeletion. And I don't think that is a medically abusive person. But of course, we do need to realise that Gypsy as a child was a victim because she can't consent to everything that's going on. But it's very clear as Gypsy was growing up, she was complicit. She was an accomplice in these scams. She was happy to play along when she was going to Disneyland, when she met her favourite celebrities, when they were getting a free home. She was happy to play along then. But as soon as her mother intervened and stopped this relationship with this 30-odd-year-old man, this is when it was enough for Gypsy. Gypsy wanted to be free so she could be with Dan. The main thing that I really want to clear up here when it comes to Dee Dee Blanchard is this whole Munchausen by proxy diagnosis. The mental disorder where the caregiver fabricates or induces illness in someone else as a way to gain sympathy, be seen as a selfless person, to gain attention. But did you know that this was never a diagnosis? Dee Dee Blanchard was not diagnosed with Munchausen by proxy. What this was the work of the media. And I mean, of course it was. Dee Dee Blanchard's body wasn't even cold before Gypsy Rose was crowned a hero. The same people who once pitied the mother now pitied the murderer. All because she cried so pretty and perfectly on camera. 48 hours after the discovery of Dee Dee's dead body, the narrative of poor Gypsy was worldwide. And it has actually been confirmed that it was internet sleuths who had diagnosed Dee Dee with Munchausen by proxy. Not a doctor, not an expert, not a specialist, internet sleuths. And the media, they ran with it. Dee Dee Blanchard was never ever diagnosed with Munchausen by proxy. And when you really look into this case, when you take a deep dive, when you go head first in the deep end, you will realise that Dee Dee actually matches a lot better malingering by proxy. And malingering by proxy, this is when a caregiver fakes or exaggerates illness in a way for external gain, like money, like trips, maybe a house, free travel and tangible rewards. And that is exactly what Dee Dee did. She was using her daughter as a way to scam funds from charities and organisations. She knew that sympathy was currency. Dee Dee wasn't craving attention, she was craving control and some financial gain. Sympathy paid the bills, it kept their fridge full. She wasn't a delusional woman medically abusing her daughter, she was strategic. What's also very interesting to me is when you look up Munchausen by proxy, when you really learn about cases that involve Munchausen by proxy, it's usually in adult mothers That is true. But usually what happens is these mothers will poison their children. They will make their children sick. They will actually cause them physical harm, sometimes resulting in their death, all to garner attention. This isn't what Dee Dee was doing. Dee Dee wasn't actually forcing Gypsy to be ill. She wasn't making Gypsy ill. She wasn't poisoning her. She was simply faking certain things. Gypsy was never poisoned. Her life was never in danger by the lies that they were telling. They were simply gaining financially. However, it bodes well for Gypsy to also play into the narrative that her mother had Munchausen by proxy, because that paints her as a victim. That paints her as someone whose life could be in danger. It gives her motive. It gives her reason. However, Dee Dee better fits malingering by proxy, and Gypsy was complicit within this. She was noted to be malingering by the age of 14. She was playing along because she too knew that she could reap financial rewards. And if she admitted that she was playing along, this wouldn't look good for her, because then she was lacking motive. Because if you're actively participating, if you're actively complicit, how can you be the victim you say you are? But if she plays along with Munchausen by proxy, if she plays along with the fact that her mother was sick, she was mentally ill, this allows her to look like poor Gypsy. So Dee Dee's sick daughter, this wasn't all completely lies, this wasn't completely fabricated. Gypsy actually did have illness as a child. There was procedures she likely needed to treat symptoms of the microdeletion. She needed the eye surgery. She needed tubes in her ears. She needed all of that, and Dee Dee made sure that she was catered for. But of course, again, there was elements that Dee Dee lied about. The leukemia, that was all fake, and this was for financial gain. But again, she wasn't hurting Gypsy. She was shaving her head, sure, keeping her in a wheelchair most of the time. Not great. That is a form of abuse. But a victim can also become an accomplice. So yeah, Dee Dee was a bit of a con woman. She knew how to get money. She knew how to live the high life and develop a fantasy life for her and her daughter by exaggerating or maybe even falsifying some of her daughter's illnesses. And Gypsy also learned that sympathy is currency, because she didn't turn down the Disneyland trips, the free clothing, the money, the new house. She happily accepted. When Gypsy Rose walked out of prison in 2023, it wasn't the quiet, reflective homecoming you would expect of someone who just served 8 years for orchestrating the murder of their own mother. No, because Gypsy, she comes out with the hair done, she's got a full PR team around her, full PR plan and package, and she has a media team just swarming her. Within 24 hours, Gypsy Rose Blanchard had went from inmate to influencer. There was interviews, photo shoots, People magazine's exclusives. She even had a verified Instagram account before she even had her own bank card. And this whole rebrand redemption thing that she's done, honestly, it's quite genius. Because gone is a soft-spoken woman in orange scrubs, and in her place, the new Gypsy, the picture of redemption. Pastel colours, modest outfits, big smiles, and let's not forget the captions about healing, forgiveness and growth. And Gypsy Rose, she didn't just walk free, she walked right out into this perfect redemption arc. And the world has ate it up because of everything that we've been fed for all these years, which is why telling the truth is so goddamn important. She became the ultimate survivor story, victim to villain to viral sensation. But if you watch this woman closely, you will realise that every single thing she has done since leaving prison is completely calculated. Part PR strategy and part emotional manipulation. Every single public statement, it's been perfectly timed in a way that ensures that people will stay on her side. She will always say just enough that makes her kind of sound remorseful, but also enough that reminds you, or at least tries to paint the picture, that she was the victim. She has never ever taken real accountability, because real accountability means facing the truth. And Gypsy Rose will never face or admit the truth. You cannot heal and you cannot have redemption when you are faking a story. Every single time this woman speaks about her mother, she will say things like, I forgive her, she was sick, I understand now. Because this makes her seem evolved, it makes her seem grown. But what she is really doing is reframing the entire story again. Keeping the spotlight exactly where she wants it, shining on exactly what part is important to her. And it's not even just the words that she says, it's the way she's able to play the public. She has mastered the art of balancing tragedy and TikTok, trauma and trend. She will cry on a podcast one day and then the next she is posting these cheeky selfies. One week she's healing, the next minute pregnancy announcement. And all these big reveals, they come at a very important time, at a time when something is being released to benefit her. Even her relationships, they are a huge part of her rebrand. I mean, she married Ryan Anderson while she was still in prison. She's out after a couple of months. They're getting a divorce. She's announcing a baby with her new lover. And that, it's not healing. That is headline choreography. She knows what she's doing. She is so freaking smart, I swear to you right now. It is all about staying in control of the narrative, keeping the cameras rolling, and making sure the audience never looks too hard to find the truth. And the saddest part might be the fact that it's actually working. She is fooling millions of people across the world. Brands are falling at her feet for collaboration. Entire comment sections will defend her like she is still the sick little girl. She is not lying for survival, she is lying for status. And there we have it. Dee Blanchard is dead, buried under a legacy that she will never ever have the chance to defend. Remembered as this monster mother who tortured her child. But we are all learning now that that is not the truth. Nick Godejohn, the man who was exploited and manipulated and groomed into this murder, he will likely die behind bars. His life was over the minute he met Gypsy Rose Blanchard. And then we have Gypsy. She is the only one who got exactly what she wanted from this whole tragedy. She walks free, always camera ready, always smiling, soaking up the sympathy that once belonged to the woman who she destroyed. And it's such a strange thing to think about. The fact that the one who did the stabbing is now sitting in a cell for the rest of his life. Never ever had a fair trial. The one who was stabbed is buried in the ground, whose legacy is one so horrific, who can't tell her side of the story. And then the one who planned it all, the one who manipulated and continues to manipulate and exploit everyone around her, she gets the book deal. She gets the fan base. And that right there is not justice. It is a performance. Dee Dee's name, unfortunately, is always going to come with the word monster attached to it. Nick's name is always going to come with the word murderer attached to it. And then there's Gypsy, who will always be branded with the word survivor by at least some. But maybe, just maybe, these labels are all backwards. And they're not on the person they should be. And maybe the real tragedy isn't what happened in that pink house that day. Maybe it's what's happened after it. The way the truth ended up being twisted. The way the story got sold. And the way that the only voice left to tell this story is the best liar of them all. Because Gypsy Rose didn't survive her mother. She outlived her legacy. And in doing so, she has made sure that hers will shine brighter, no matter how dark that truth really is. But my loves, that is it for another true crime and makeup episode. I really hope this one was interesting. I hope it's given you something to think about. And I do just want to say, everyone is entitled to their opinions. So please, if you have any opposing thoughts, theories, anything, or you have additional evidence, please comment it down below. Everyone is welcome in the comment section. Please just remember to be respectful of each other. I mean, we've all got our own feelings and opinions when it comes to this case. And it's really great for us to be able to have a platform where we can discuss everything that's going on. And before anyone comments, please bear in mind that I know I haven't hit every single point. I know that. Becca Scoops is the woman for that. I definitely recommend that you go over, take a look through her page, start at the very top, work your way down, because that woman has done impeccable work. And honestly, Becca Scoops, the woman you are. So yes, there will definitely be things that you might think, oh, you've not mentioned that. You can comment it down below, but please know that I can't fit everything into this video. My memory card's too small. I wish I could. I wish I could sit here for like 10 hours doing it, but unfortunately I can't. I can do additional parts if you would like that, but I can't do it in one big massive video. So I've tried to cover the points that really stuck out to me, but there is so much. There is so much more evidence and truth out there that we all need to understand. If you did enjoy this video, please make sure you leave a like, comment, subscribe if you haven't already, and please don't forget to hype up the video. It means the entire world to me. It really helps boost out my channel, helps grow this community of people that we're building here, and I just want you to know that I absolutely love, adore, and appreciate every single one of you. Your support never ever goes unnoticed, and it truly means the world to me. But that is it for today. Please, please, please remember, be a good person. Do not be a bad person. Stay safe. Look after each other, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!